I didn't think much of it when Sierra mentioned the business lunch that afternoon. New clients, she said with a shrug, running a hand through her perfectly straightened hair. Her phone buzzed 3 times before she even finished her coffee, and I watched her swipe away the alerts without blinking. She'd been like that lately, distracted, always somewhere else, like our life had become the waiting room to something more exciting. Still, I kissed her goodbye and told her K*LL it today. She smiled, polite, distant, and walked out the door in those heels I hadn't seen her wear since our anniversary dinner. It registered as strange, but I chalked it up to her trying to make a good impression. I spent most of the day buried in papers and lesson plans. The spring semester was winding down and the pressure was building for both of us. I told myself not to overthink it. She was just doing her job, networking, keeping her edge. That's what she always said, in my field, if you're not visible, you're replaceable. It wasn't until a little after 3 p.m. that my phone buzzed with a text from Jordan, one of my former students, now working part-time at a trendy downtown restaurant. I hadn't heard from him in a while, so I assumed it was something casual. But when I saw the message preview, my pulse kicked up. "Hey, Professor, I didn't want to make this awkward or anything, but I think I saw your wife today. She was at my work. Not alone. Looked not super professional. I recorded a clip. Up to you if you want to see it." For a full minute I just stared at the screen. My first instinct was denial. It had to be a mistake. Some woman who looked like her. Some misunderstanding. Jordan had always been a good kid, but maybe he read the room wrong. Maybe he shouldn't have sent it at all. Still, I typed out "send it." And he did. The clip was just under a minute, shaky and a little grainy, but it didn't matter. There she was, Sierra, tucked into a corner booth near the back. Her blazer was off, her white blouse slightly unbuttoned in a way that didn't scream client lunch. Across from her sat a man I didn't recognize, older, graying at the temples, confident in that expensive, untouchable kind of way. They weren't just chatting. Their bodies leaned inward like magnets. Her fingers reached across the table to touch his hand, casually at first, then lingered. Her laugh, unfiltered and warm, cut through the restaurant's background noise. About 40 seconds in, they kissed. Not a peck. Not something that could be passed off as a European greeting. It was real. An asterisk mate. The kind of kiss you reserve for someone you miss when they're not around. I watched it once. Then again. And again. I couldn't look away. My hands trembled slightly as I set the phone down, and for a long moment I just sat there in the stillness of my office, hearing nothing but the blood pounding in my ears. She had told me this was a client lunch. I had believed her without hesitation. And now here I was, blindsided by 60 seconds of truth I hadn't asked for. I didn't call her. I didn't message Jordan. I didn't scream or throw things or spiral, at least not outwardly. I just sat in the quiet and let it settle in. The shock. The betrayal. The weight of not knowing how long this had been going on or how many other details I'd accepted without question. Sierra got home just after 6. She kicked off her shoes, called out a tired "Hey babe," and headed straight to the kitchen like nothing had happened. She poured herself a glass of red wine, pulled her hair into a loose bun, and began scrolling through her phone like it had oxygen in it. "Lunch go okay?" I asked from the hallway. She looked up, blinked, and smiled. "Yeah." They were a little flaky at first, but I reeled them in. She raised her glass. "We're pitching a proposal next week." "Who's we?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She didn't skip a beat. "Me and Calvin." "The usual. You've met him at the mixer last year." "Calvin. Not the man in the video. Not even close." Dinner was microwave lasagna and half-hearted conversation. I couldn't eat much. Every time she laughed or shifted in her seat, I saw the booth. The kiss. Her hand on his. I waited until the dishes were in the sink and she was curled up on the couch in her usual spot, blanket over her legs, wine glass in hand, reruns of something she wasn't really watching flickering on the screen. I sat across from her. Quiet. Focused. Then I pulled out my phone, opened the video, and hit play. Her entire body tensed. She didn't say anything for a few seconds. Just stared. When the video ended, she set her wine down carefully like it might explode. "Are you serious right now?" she said, her voice calm in the way that made my skin crawl. "You're spying on me?" "I didn't film it," I said. "Jordan did. He works there. He recognized you." She rolled her eyes. "Unbelievable. What was he doing?" "Lurking behind plants like some creep." "He was working. Saw you. Thought I should know." She scoffed and leaned back into the couch like she was dealing with a tantrum. "Okay, let me save us both the drama. That was Greg. Yes, we had lunch. Yes, we kissed. It was a joke. Kind of a dare. Not even a real kiss. And no, it's not what you think. My mouth went dry. You kissed someone else. In a booth. During what you told me was a work lunch. She waved it off. You're being so dramatic. You don't know the context. Then tell me. Ethan, she said, and now her voice turned soft, almost pitying. You get so in your head sometimes. You build these entire narratives over nothing. I can't breathe in this house without being under your microscope. I laughed sharp, bitter. You're kidding, right? No, she snapped. You always assume the worst. Maybe that says more about you than me. There it was. The pivot. I'd seen it before, but not like this. Not with evidence in hand. Within 5 minutes, the entire conversation had flipped. I was the villain. The obsessive husband. The insecure academic with control issues. She even tried to make me feel guilty for checking my phone during work hours. Said I should be more focused on my students than on trying to catch her in some imagined scandal. It was unreal. A full-blown reversal of reality. She wasn't defensive because she was guilty. No. She was disappointed that I didn't trust her. That I let a random video from some ex-student shake my faith in her professionalism. I didn't argue. Not really. I asked questions, let her talk, let her spin the web she was clearly used to spinning. And I just watched her. At some point, she got up and walked away, muttering something about needing space and me ruining a perfectly normal day. And I sat there, staring at the paused frame on my phone, Sierra leaning forward, smiling, lips parting, while everything I thought I knew about our marriage tilted sideways. That night, after Sierra stormed upstairs and slammed the door, I just sat on the couch, staring at nothing. The wine glass she left behind still had her lipstick on the rim, crimson, confident, unapologetic. I kept looking at it like it was going to explain something to me. Like maybe it held answers I couldn't find in her voice. But no answers came. Just silence. And the longer I sat in that silence, the more I started remembering things. Things I had pushed aside or rationalized, moments I dismissed as quirks or stress or the natural ebb and flow of a long marriage. But now they came back, one by one, like dominoes clicking into place. It started small. I remembered how she changed her perfume just out of nowhere. She came back from a conference in Chicago a few months ago with a new scent, bold and expensive, not something she'd ever worn before. I asked about it and she said it was a gift from the hotel. Some promotion thing, she'd claimed, waving it off. I didn't press. But now I remembered how she started wearing it on days she claimed she had back-to-back meetings. How I'd sometimes come home to the smell of it lingering even though she swore she'd been gone all day. Then there was the wardrobe shift. She used to dress like most people in marketing, polished but practical. But lately, her style had turned more deliberate. Lower necklines. Higher heels. Outfits she'd never have worn to a client meeting a year ago. I told myself it was confidence. Reinvention. A phase. She started working later. That's what she told me anyway. Late nights. Tight deadlines, she'd say. End of quarter scramble. I brought her takeout once, showed up at her office. She wasn't there. She called 20 minutes later and said she had stepped out for a meeting. Said I should have called first. I apologized for trying to surprise her. She made me feel like I'd crossed a line. I remembered how her laptop, which used to live on the kitchen counter, suddenly became sacred. She'd snap it shut the second I walked in. Said she was tired of working at home. Said I was too nosy. Same with her phone, which went from casually lying face up on the coffee table to always being in her hand or tucked deep in her bag. Even in the bathroom. Even in the shower. I asked about it once and got an eye roll. Seriously, Ethan? It's 2025. Everyone's glued to their phones. Then there was the webinar. That one sticks with me the most. It was a Wednesday night around 8 p.m. I had just finished dinner and she was upstairs attending a virtual roundtable. She said it was some industry panel and she needed quiet. I passed by the office and heard laughter, not from a crowd or a speaker, but hers. Warm and real. It caught me off guard. When I knocked to ask if she wanted coffee, she fumbled with the mute button and shouted, busy. Later. That laugh? That specific laugh. It was the same one I heard in Jordan's video. Not her fake Zoom call chuckle, not her polite boardroom giggle, her real laugh. The one she hadn't used with me in months. How had I missed all of this? No. That wasn't the question. I hadn't missed it. I had ignored it. I had chosen not to see it. Because I wanted to believe in us. In her. In what we had built. We met in college. Fell hard. Everyone called us the golden couple. We bought this house together, adopted a rescue dog who died 3 years ago, and had a rhythm to our life that I thought was unshakable. We fought, sure. But we had history. We had promises. I thought that was enough. But now, replaying every little moment like a slow-motion car crash, I realized she had been checking out for a while, leaving breadcrumb trails of detachment that I pretended weren't there. Like the weekend she said she was going to a girls' retreat in Vermont. She sent me a single photo, her and two women I didn't recognize, standing by a lake. The background was blurred. The lighting was weird. I remember showing it to my brother, Logan, and he'd raised an eyebrow and said, "Why's it look like a stock photo?" I laughed it off. Now I wasn't laughing. Or the time she left her iPad unlocked and I saw a hotel confirmation from a place in Providence. When I asked about it, she said it was a system glitch. "Old reservation I forgot to cancel," she said. But I remember the exact date. It was the same weekend she claimed she was at her mom's. She lied. She lied and lied and lied, and I believed her every time because I didn't want to face what that would mean. If I pulled at one thread, the whole thing unraveled. And maybe I didn't want to know just how far it had all gone. Until now. Now, I didn't have a choice. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling in our bedroom while she lay next to me, breathing evenly like nothing had happened. I kept my body rigid, every nerve on edge. Her phone buzzed once around 2 a.m. She didn't stir, but I saw the screen light up, just a name. Greg. No message preview. No context. Greg. I didn't know him. He wasn't one of her coworkers, not from what I could remember. But I knew what I saw. And suddenly everything made sense. She didn't bother to change his name. Didn't need to. She knew I wouldn't check. That's how much trust she had in my blind faith. That's how much she knew I wanted to believe her. I got out of bed and sat in the guest room until dawn, scrolling back through months of memories, trying to figure out when exactly she stopped loving me, or when she decided I wasn't enough. It hurt in a way I wasn't ready for. Like the floor under our life had collapsed and I was still waiting to hit bottom. I wanted to confront her again, to scream, to demand the truth, but what would be the point? She'd spin it again, twist it until it was my fault. My jealousy, my overthinking, my need for too much reassurance. So I waited. I waited for the universe to stop whispering and start shouting. And 2 days later it did. It was a Thursday when everything came to a head. The day started like any other, coffee half finished, emails unanswered, calendar double booked. My head wasn't in work. It hadn't been since the video. Since the lies. Since the night I lay in the guest room feeling like a stranger in my own life. I told my department chair I needed to leave early, a plumbing issue, I said. He nodded, didn't ask questions. Everyone was on edge that week anyway. Midterms had turned the campus into a graveyard of empty energy drinks and whispered panic. I got in my car and started the drive home. It wasn't planned. There was no grand strategy. Just a gut feeling. Something was wrong. The house was too quiet when I got there. Sierra's car was in the driveway even though she was supposed to be downtown for a client debrief. That's what she called it anyway. Her voice on the phone that morning had been clipped, cheerful, almost rehearsed. I stepped inside and listened. Silence. The kind that doesn't feel peaceful but staged. Like someone had just hit pause on a scene they weren't ready to explain. Upstairs I heard voices. Faint. Male. Then a quick shuffle, feet moving. A thump. A laugh that died too quickly. My heart started pounding in that sick, slow way, like the body knows it's about to break before the mind can catch up. I didn't rush. I didn't shout. I moved slowly down the hall toward the bedroom where the door sat slightly ajar as if someone had left it that way in a hurry. A sliver of light stretched across the hallway carpet. And then I saw them. Through that narrow gap, not wide enough to be open, not closed enough to protect them, I saw Sierra standing by the bed in a wine-colored satin slip I didn't recognize. Her hair was down, damp at the ends like she'd just stepped out of the shower. She wasn't panicked. She wasn't frantic. She looked playful. Comfortable. Across from her, bent over trying to find his socks, was a man I'd never seen before. Shirt half-buttoned. Shoes off. His tie was on the dresser next to our framed wedding photo. They hadn't seen me. I stood there for a long time, I think. Tom stopped being real. My hands didn't shake. My body didn't move. I was still. Watching. Processing. Memorizing every last frame like it would matter later, like it would explain something to someone someday. I didn't go in. I didn't yell. Didn't throw anything. Didn't ask questions I already knew the answers to. I turned around. Walked down the stairs. Out the front door. I stood in the driveway for a second, breathing. The sky was gray, that flat, dim New England gray that makes the day feel unfinished. I reached into my pocket, pulled off my wedding ring, and placed it gently on the hood of my car. I don't know why. Maybe it felt symbolic. Maybe I wanted her to see it. Maybe I just didn't want it on me anymore. Then I got in the car and drove. No destination. Just away. I ended up parked near the river, engine off, windows cracked. The smell of wet leaves and spring rot wafted in through the vents. I stared at the water until the numbness started to peel back and the emotions poured in thick, raw, disorganized. There was no more denial. It wasn't just a suspicion or a strange text or a change in perfume. It wasn't a blurry video from a well-meaning former student. It was her, in my bed with someone else. Half-dressed. Laughing. It was the confirmation I never wanted. And it was absolute. I didn't cry. Not then. I wanted to. I wanted that cinematic release, the fists on the steering wheel, the shouting into nothing. But all I felt was hollow. Like someone had scraped out my insides and left a thin shell behind. I checked my phone once. No messages. No missed calls. Of course not. She hadn't even realized I was there. By sunset, I drove to a gas station, bought a pack of gum I didn't want, and sat there for another 30 minutes pretending I had errands. I called Logan. He answered on the third ring. You okay? No, I said. My voice cracked for the first time. I think I need somewhere to go. There was no hesitation. Come up. I'll make up the couch. I won't be in the way? You're not. That was it. No questions. No prodding. Just space. When I got back to the house, if I could still call it that, I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. I walked around to the side door of the garage, grabbed an old duffel bag from the storage bin, and filled it with enough clothes to last a few days. A pair of sneakers. My laptop. My passport, for some reason. Maybe just to feel like I could leave the country if I wanted to. I left everything else. Even my toothbrush. I didn't want anything that smelled like her. The street was dark by then. Porch lights flickering on. That neighbor kid across the street kicking a soccer ball against the fence like the world was still spinning the way it always had. I drove north. No radio. No podcasts. Just the road and the weird, steady sound of my own breathing. Logan's cabin was 2 hours away, tucked into the woods of New Hampshire. No cell reception. Just trees and quiet. I hadn't been up there in years, not since a New Year's weekend trip when Sierra and I were still in the honeymoon phase, still obsessed with each other. I pulled up just before 10 p.m. Logan was on the porch, a flashlight in one hand, wearing the same flannel jacket he always wore when things got serious. Thought you'd be here sooner, he said, and clapped me on the shoulder. I took the long way. We didn't talk that night. He just handed me a beer, showed me where the extra blankets were, and let me be. I lay on that old plaid couch, staring at the knotty pine ceiling, and for the first time in weeks, I slept. No dreams. No cold silences. No half-truths sitting beside me in bed. Just rest. And the quiet truth of it all wrapping around me like a blanket I hadn't realized I needed. The morning after I arrived at Logan's cabin, I woke up with sunlight on my face and silence in my chest. No buzzing phone. No footsteps above me. No tension curled around the edges of my thoughts. Just pine-scented air and the kind of quiet you don't notice until it replaces chaos. Logan was already outside, stacking firewood in his beat-up Carhartt jacket. He didn't say anything when I joined him, just handed me a log and pointed at the pile. That was his way. He didn't force conversation. He didn't poke at open wounds. He just made space, and sometimes that was the loudest form of support. We worked in silence for maybe an hour, the rhythm of chopping and stacking dulling the edge of the memories. My body needed it. My mind needed it more. Later, while he made coffee inside, I sat on the porch with a mug that had a chipped rim and a faded Loon Lake logo. I stared out at the woods, at the stillness between the trees, and finally pulled out my phone. 17 messages. It started with, "Hey, where are you?" Then, "Are you coming home?" Then, "We need to talk." And by the 5th message, the tone shifted. "I can't believe you just walked out." By the 7th, she was angry. By the 9th, she was blaming me. By the 12th, she was rewriting history. "If you were unhappy, you should have said something. I never would have done anything if you hadn't been so distant. You abandoned us." That word hit different. Like we were still a team. Like she hadn't already lit the whole thing on fire and handed me a garden hose. I didn't respond. I let the notifications pile up. Let them rot in the inbox. Every vibration reminded me who she really was underneath the charm and the denial. Someone who didn't want the truth. She wanted control. And when that started to slip, so did her mask. Logan watched me read the texts and didn't say a word. He just poured another cup of coffee and pushed it across the table. I think he knew I wasn't ready to talk yet. He was right. That afternoon, I borrowed his truck and drove back into town. My hands still felt like they belonged to someone else, but I moved with a strange kind of clarity. Like the fog had lifted, and I could finally see the chessboard for what it was. I stopped by the house first. When I knew she wouldn't be home, I didn't go inside. I just opened the garage and pulled out the 2 plastic storage bins I'd packed the night before. I added a few essentials. A worn hoodie from college, my old hiking boots, some books I hadn't finished. I didn't want much. I didn't want to look like I was stealing anything. Just what was mine. Just what mattered. Then I stopped by my cousin's place and left the bins in his garage. He wasn't home, but we'd talked before. Back when I first started suspecting things. He'd offered space, no questions asked. I left him a note. Thanks for giving this stuff a place to breathe. I'm figuring it out. Appreciate you. Then I drove to a storage facility off Route 3 and rented a unit for 6 months under my name only. It was a small concrete room with no windows, and it felt like a metaphor I didn't want to think too hard about. But it was mine. That night, I booked a cheap room near the airport, not because I had a flight to catch, but because the anonymity of a hotel felt right. Sierra messaged me again. I didn't read them. I didn't need to. Instead, I lay on a stiff mattress with bad pillows, staring at the cracked ceiling and trying to remember what peace used to feel like. The TV played quietly in the background, some old movie with explosions and forced sentimentality, and I let it play without really listening. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. But at some point, around 2 a.m., I whispered, "I miss you," to the empty room. Not to Sierra, but to the version of myself that used to feel whole. The next morning, I drove back to Logan's. He was outside again, this time cleaning his grill. He looked up when I pulled in and nodded like I'd just gotten back from a long trip. "You staying?" he asked. "For a bit." That was it. No follow-up. No pressure. He handed me a spare key and pointed toward the shed out back. "If you need to chop anything, axe is behind the door." We didn't talk about Sierra. Not that day. Maybe not even the next. But I started to thaw. I slept more. Ate. I went on long walks in the woods where I didn't see another soul for hours. I let the trees breathe for me when I couldn't. Logan worked during the day. Some freelance carpentry gig he picked up after ditching corporate life. In the evenings, we sat by the fire and drank bad beer. Sometimes he told stories about mutual friends. Sometimes we said nothing at all. I stopped checking my phone. Turned off notifications entirely. It was the only way to keep the poison from seeping in. A few days in, Sierra called. I let it ring. I let it go to voicemail. And when the transcript popped up, I read it once and deleted it. "Ethan, I don't understand why you're doing this. We had a fight. That's it. You don't just disappear on your wife. That's not how this works. Call me." The entitlement in her voice made my stomach twist. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't something to be massaged with therapy and apologies. This was betrayal. Plain and simple. A few hours later, she emailed me. Subject line, "We need to fix this." Inside, paragraphs of revisionist history. It wasn't serious. It didn't mean anything. I only did it because I thought you didn't care. The blame game again. Her default defense. And in between the lines, the same old theme. "This was your fault, Ethan. You pushed me here." But I knew better now. One afternoon, Logan and I sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the ridge. I finally broke the silence. She kissed him before she saw me. He nodded. I think that's the part that stuck. That it wasn't guilt or panic or fear. She was just there. With him. Like it was normal. Logan didn't try to reframe it. He didn't say maybe there's more to it or she could have been confused. He just said, yeah. That was enough. The next day, I called a lawyer. Logan knew a guy, old friend, quiet, efficient, no drama. I scheduled a consultation for the following week. I didn't tell Sierra. Not yet. I wasn't doing this out of rage. I was doing it to reclaim myself. To stop living in the echo of someone else's mistakes. To breathe. To become real again. That night, as the fire cracked and the trees swayed just slightly in the breeze, I took out my phone and looked at the last photo Sierra and I had taken together. We were at a fall festival, holding cider, smiling. My arm was around her shoulder. Her smile was wide. But her eyes weren't looking at me. Not really. They were already somewhere else. I deleted the photo. Then I slept deeper than I had in weeks. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't dream about her at all. A week passed before she showed up. I should have known she wouldn't let things end quietly. Sierra never walked away from anything without making sure she had the last word. Even in arguments about groceries or who left the porch light on, she needed control. It wasn't always obvious. She didn't yell or throw things, but she had a way of bending reality, of recasting the story until she was the one wronged, no matter what had happened. I was out back, chopping kindling behind Logan's shed when I heard the tires crunching over the gravel drive. At first, I thought it was the UPS guy or maybe one of Logan's weekend buddies showing up unannounced. But when I rounded the corner and saw her car, spotless, sleek, out of place in the dirt and pine, my stomach knotted immediately. She stepped out like she belonged there. Dark sunglasses. Black turtleneck. Her hair pulled back into a tight bun, the kind she only wore when she was trying to look composed under pressure. She stood next to the car for a moment, scanning the cabin like she expected me to rush out and greet her. I didn't move. She spotted me a second later, then walked toward me, not hurried, not hesitant. Just sure. I didn't say a word. She reached the edge of the clearing, heels sinking slightly into the mossy ground, and crossed her arms. You really weren't going to talk to me, she said. I said nothing. She let the silence stretch before continuing. I've been calling, texting, emailing. You blocked me? I didn't block you, I said. I just stopped listening. Her jaw tightened. That's mature. That made me laugh short and dry. Mature? Coming from you. She blinked once. That flinch, subtle and fast, told me I'd hit something. But she recovered instantly. I came here to talk, she said. You already said everything. No, she snapped. I didn't. Because you never gave me the chance. She took a breath, tried to soften. Ethan, I know I messed up. But walking out? Leaving without a word? That's not how adults handle problems. I didn't respond. I just stared at her. She didn't look like someone who came to apologize. She looked like someone ready to negotiate a contract. I've been thinking, she continued, and I know we can fix this. You and me. We've been through worse. Have we? Her voice cracked slightly, just for a second. You're not even going to try? You weren't trying, I said. You were hiding. Lying. Sneaking around. But I was supposed to keep pretending that nothing was wrong so you didn't feel uncomfortable. That's not fair. Neither was cheating on me. Her face flushed. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. She went quiet, lips pressed together, then looked around like she just realized how far from her world she really was. No office walls. No assistants. No one to agree with her. That's when her tone changed. She dropped the remorse. Dropped the soft eyes. Her voice became cold, not angry, just precise. You're not being smart about this. I raised an eyebrow. Smart. You're angry, and I get that. But disappearing into the woods, ghosting me, refusing to talk like a normal person? That makes you look unstable. I blinked. Excuse me. She stepped closer. Ethan, I'm trying to help you. If this turns into something legal, which I really hope it doesn't, you don't want a record of ghosting your wife and hiding out in the middle of nowhere. That's not a good look. I let that sit in the air. She didn't flinch. She'd practiced this. Rehearsed the whole speech on the drive up. This marriage still has value, she said, calm again. We've built something. And you walking away like this isn't just emotional, it's strategic. There are consequences. There it was. The real reason she came. Not for closure. Not for me. For control. You think I'm afraid of you? I asked, stepping forward. You think I'm worried about how this looks? She tilted her chin, studied me. I think you're angry. I think you're impulsive. And I think if you want to come out of this with any dignity, you should sit down with me and figure this out. I stared at her like I didn't know her anymore. Because I didn't. I don't need dignity, I said. I need peace. And I'll get that without you. Something shifted in her expression. Just for a moment, her mouth opened like she might yell, but nothing came out. Then she saw movement behind me. Logan. He'd stepped out onto the porch, arms folded, leaning against the post. He wasn't saying anything. He didn't have to. Sierra glanced at him, then back at me. I see, she said quietly. You've got backup now. I didn't respond. She took a breath, blew it out through her nose. Then she pulled her sunglasses down from her forehead and slipped them back on. Well, she said, turning toward her car. You'll be hearing from someone soon. I hope you're prepared. She opened the door, paused, looked over the roof at me one last time. You always were dramatic, Ethan. But this is embarrassing. And then she got in, started the engine, and pulled out of the driveway. We stood in silence, listening to her tires fade into the trees. Logan let out a low whistle. She's got nerve. She's scared, I said. Of what? Losing her version of the story. He nodded. You good? No, I said. But I'm better. That night, I opened a new document on my laptop and started outlining everything. Dates. Receipts. The video. The signs I'd ignored. I wasn't planning revenge. I wasn't even planning to drag her name through the mud. I was building a foundation. One that didn't move when someone like her tried to shake it. Because I knew, now more than ever, this wouldn't be the last time she tried to rewrite what happened. She'd tell her friends I abandoned her. That I overreacted. That I was always suspicious. That she never really did anything wrong. But I would have the truth. And that would be enough.